After watching this show, I made the mistake of reading Vince Russo's blog. So maybe I'm a little harsher because I had just seen this show and went and read his blog on his website. He called it The Real Challenge Plaguing TNA. And I see all these wrestling websites, heaping praise or saying, oh, it's well worth the read. Yeah, it's well worth the read for somebody, from the perspective of somebody who once worked for the company. I'll give you that. But they're praising it like, oh, he hit the nail on the head, what a great piece. And I'm just thinking to myself, are you people out of your minds? He talks about how it's not creative. Okay, because creative is all subjective. That's not the problem plaguing TNA. No, it's the crowds that are dead because they tape at Universal Studios, where there are no hardcore wrestling fans, and it's all theme park visitors who come inside because it's too hot outside. And then they tape 2 shows in one night, which makes the crowd tired. And on top of that, they don't show all the pre-tapes to the people in the building. So they can't get invested because they don't know what's going on, or why this is happening, or why that is happening. He's got 1,000,001 excuses why TNA can never get ahead, and it has nothing to do with creative. Which is probably the number one thing that's wrong with TNA right now. But here's a guy who's never taken responsibility for anything in his life. Anything that he's ever been called out on before. It's never his fault. All the interviews that this guy has done, it's never his fault. It's always someone else's fault, or the fans were tired, or we didn't have enough money, or it was daylight savings time, or LeBron got a leg cramp, or I can't believe it's not butter, or whatever the excuse is, he's always got one. Everything he talked about there has some truth to it. The crowds are dead. And that hurts the show. But he talks about there being no hardcore wrestling fans there. NXT tapes its shows at Full Sail University in Winter Park, Florida. You know how far Winter Park is from Orlando? 7.3 miles. I know that because Google told me. That's a 13-minute drive. They're practically right next to each other. Watch any of those NXT shows. It sounds a lot like Smart Mark wrestling fans to me. It doesn't just sound like a bunch of college kids who know nothing about wrestling. NXT can get those people into the building. Why can't TNA? Stop making excuses. 900 people did not wander into the fucking Impact Zone because Grandma was about to keel over from heat stroke. He says they tape 1.5 shows in the building, and so the fans get tired and they don't react. I'm sure that's true. WWE does 3 hours of Raw every single week, and their crowds have sucked lately. But I go back to NXT, because it's the closest thing to Impact. I can't even compare Raw to Impact anymore. NXT to Impact is a more apt comparison these days. Go back to NXT. They tape 4 shows in one night, usually. Now, Impact is 2 hours, NXT is 1. So, technically, it's like taping 2 Impacts. And usually, the crowds for that 3rd and 4th NXT, they're not as boisterous as they were for the first 1 or 2. That doesn't excuse the crappy content on the show. And the pre-tape stuff, you know what, dude? Maybe that's a sign that you're doing too many pre-tapes. Maybe that's not what people want to see. Maybe more action and less talking. I've never seen more talking on a wrestling show than I have on Impact, from a promotion that calls itself Total Nonstop Action. A name, by the way, that we can credit to Vince Russo, who thought it would be a good idea to name a wrestling company after tits and ass. What about house shows? Tommy Dreamer just did somewhere in the range of 1,300 people for a show in Poughkeepsie, New York. At the same time, TNA was drawing maybe 200 people at a stadium show in Maryland. One has national TV exposure and 12 years of history. The other has no TV and had its first show a couple of years ago. How do you explain that one? Almost 1,800 words this guy wrote on his website in this blog, and not one time did he suggest, in a column titled The Real Challenge Plaguing TNA, that maybe, just maybe, the actual problem is the product sucks. That you are the plague on TNA. So is Dixie. But this guy's fingerprints are all over these shows. Just because he has no contract with them doesn't mean he's not feeding them ideas. The fact that he sounds so defensive in this blog, and he says nothing about creative, is all the proof that you need. And after all these years, if the best these people can do is still rely on ideas from this guy, then you know what? They get exactly what they deserve.